Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Cora Mojica. I am the chair of the Ethnic Diversity Committee of the Hospital Employees Union. Along with me is Baljit Sandhu, one of our standing committee members. The Hospital Employees Union represents more than 50,000 members working in all areas of healthcare. And we are very pleased to be introducing the third webinar on HEU's series, Equity and Pandemic Justice. For you, Bal. Our committee. This year, we are celebrating 25 years of Equity Committees of HEU. Ethnic diversity, people of color, is one of these committees. The Standing Committee's commitment is to address issues of racism, discrimination, harassment in the workplaces, as well as locally, nationally, and internationally, to promote and defend the rights of ethnic minorities, eliminate language barriers through education and outreach, and encourage freedom of speech. With the rise of Asian hate and discrimination during this pandemic, it is important to raise awareness. We've been reaching out to different locals within HEU and helping refugees fundraising to support them.
There we go. Now you'll be able to hear me. Good evening, everyone. Belgi, we're having a couple of technical difficulties, and unfortunately, we didn't get to hear anything that you said, Belgi. So I will, just zip back a little bit, and I will do the land acknowledgement this evening. I am zooming in from the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including lands belonging to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. This is an important acknowledgement that we take the time to acknowledge the lands on which we're on, and it would be fabulous if those of you watching, because we potentially could be not just all over the province, but perhaps anywhere in Turtle Island, and I think it would be lovely if people put in the comments what their land acknowledgements are. So I'm going to just jump right in to the evening. And I'm really, really pleased to have Baljit and Cora. Our session tonight is called The Rise of Racism During COVID-19. And systemic racism has always existed in our society, but the pandemic really has highlighted how deeply ingrained and problematic this racism really has become. So I'm the president of the Hospital Employees Union. I am Barb Netterpel. I will be moderating tonight's discussion. And I will shortly introduce our guests, but just quickly, I want to say thank you to Cora and to Baljeet for all that you do and your ongoing work, and in fact, the entire Ethnic Diversity Committee for your work on the committee, in the union, and in your communities. And if any of the other committee members are tuning in, please introduce yourselves in the chat as well so that we can celebrate all of you and for what you do on the committee. So, good afternoon, everybody. I am Barb Netterpel, president of the Hospital Employees Union. My pronouns are she and hers. Very excited to be here this evening. Because, over the last year especially, we've really seen a rise in discrimination and injustice, and this pandemic has really highlighted and intensified that. So we're going to be talking with two very powerful activists about what's behind this rise, and then what can we do about it. So our first speaker this afternoon is Byron Cruz. He arrived in Canada 29 years ago, fleeing persecution for resisting inequity, injustice, and state violence in Guatemala. And currently, he is the organizer and outreach coordinator for the BC Federation of Labor's Occupational Health and Safety Center's Migrant Worker Program. And that's located right here in Vancouver. He's also an active member of Sanctuary Health Collective, a grassroots collective that gives direct support and advocates with migrant families with precarious or no immigration status. And Byron organizes with the Migrants' Right Network in BC and the National Migrant Rights Network. And he does that to raise awareness about the issues faced by migrant communities and to ensure that temporary farm workers and undocumented communities have access to services and dignified working conditions. His work is grounded in his commitment to build a society rooted in equity, racial justice, and dignity. Welcome, Byron. We're very happy to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you very much for the welcoming.
And our second speaker joining us today is Shanee Prasad, a first-generation South Asian woman living on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Coast Salish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Shanee teaches at Burn Creek Community School, and that's in senior alternative education. She has a bachelor's degree in political science and a special education degree from Simon Fraser University. Shanee has also completed a master's of education degree in equity studies at SFU with comprehensive work in anti-racist pedagogy. Shanee holds various local and provincial positions within the BC Teachers Federation and is also a representative for workers of color at the BC Federation of Labor. Shanee identifies herself as a feminist and has a passion for decolonizing public education. Welcome, Shanee.
Thank you so much, Barb, and thank you, HEU, for having me here, and hello to Byron.
So how this is going to roll is over the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to be asking Byron and Shanee a series of questions for them to discuss. And for those of you who are watching live, if you have any questions that arise during this conversation, please feel free to put them in the chat. And we'll aim to have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to address some of these questions from our members and our viewers. So let's dive in. Are you ready? Okay, sounds good. I know I am. So to both of you, let's start with Shanee. Tell us more about this rise of racism over the pandemic. Was it always there? And if so, what's changed about it?
Thank you. And yeah, I think this is such an important conversation for us to be having. I think, as you said in your introduction, wherever they've been cultivated, we come from people that have been subjugated by colonialism and consistently have resisted it as well. I think what we're seeing in the pandemic is that there's been a bit of an unveiling, a societal unveiling, and we're seeing how acute it is. And the other aspect of that is that we're seeing that there hasn't been an actual, we don't actually have anything in place to deal with it. And that's why it's even more acute. And that is why we need a shift in our structures. We need better laws. We need better policies, and we need leaders that are proactive and not just speaking out against it, but doing something about it, because that is what Black, Indigenous, and communities of color deserve.
Absolutely. Byron, what do you think?
Yes, thank you so much. Just a little bit of context to try to give an idea of our experience. And yeah, my name is Byron. I came as a refugee quite a few years ago. And I remember when I grew up in a small farm. And when I was playing soccer as a little boy, I was playing soccer, and there used to be this guy who was a First Nation guy from Guatemala. In Guatemala, we had 24 different ethnic groups, and then he was indigenous, and then he used to come at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was the time to go to the mountain because there were no washrooms for people. Then he had to go to the mountain. It was 6 o'clock, exactly at 6 o'clock. Then he used to go, and every time that he saw me playing soccer, he used to say, "Byron, be careful. There is a river there, and be careful. If you are playing soccer too close to the river, you have to be careful." Then always had that. And then I realized with the years that First Nations people, indigenous people in Guatemala, despite being 70% of the population in Guatemala, they were already suffering discrimination and racism. And it was the most affected groups during the Civil War. Actually, we did have an ethnocide going on in Guatemala for 36 years against the Mayan communities. And then they were forced to come to the farm where I was living, I was growing, because they did not have enough, they only have small pieces of land. They couldn't survive with that. They needed to come and work in cotton plantations, and they were exposed to all these pesticides and all with the time, with the Civil War ending in 1996, then with having Canada as a friend of the civil process in Guatemala, we saw things are going to change. Things didn't change. Canada had a purpose in being supported with the civil process in Guatemala. They wanted our mines. They wanted our gold. They wanted all the metals that we had in Guatemala. And Canada, the Canadian companies owned so many mining companies in Guatemala. Almost probably more than 80% of the companies are Canadian in Guatemala. And then there was an introduction of Guatemala as a place where the temporary workers program could be benefiting Canada. Then this program, the existence of this temporary migrant workers program, it's more the reflection of the racism, right? It exists because migrant workers can be paid less. It exists because they cannot make use of the rights. Then it exists because Canada signed, it was a promoter of the peace process in Guatemala in order to have access to the mines, and then people didn't have jobs anymore, and then they didn't have a place to produce vegetables anymore, and then they had to, maybe this guy Zacharias was his name, who he was older at that time. He used to always tell me careful. Then this guy, I don't know what happened to him, but many people like him, they had to send their grandsons or their kids to Canada to come to work in this program, that is exploited by nature. This is the nature of the migrant workers program. And then approximately 10,000 workers come from Mexico, Guatemala, Jamaica, India, Vietnam, every year to British Columbia. And definitely COVID has exacerbated the situation in terms of racism. And yeah, definitely I can talk more about that after, maybe in the next question. Yes.
Well, that was great. That you really set the context about the international racism, and so that sets the conversation up for where we're going next. So with that in mind, Byron, like how has then the pandemic affected migrant workers here in Canada? And also to you, Shanee, like what about the South Asian communities? How have they been impacted in particular?
In this situation, since COVID started, in terms of British Columbia, we had the first farm that was affected in Kelowna. Actually, one of the farms had quite a few workers who were infected with COVID in Kelowna. As a result of that, the provincial government learned the lesson and act quickly on setting up some conversations with the different groups and different organizations and consulates. And together we came with an immediate solution to it. And it was about starting a quarantine for all migrant workers coming to British Columbia. And then this quarantine was organized and was paid by the provincial government to be carried at the hotels in Richmond. And that was a very good step and result of this conversation that we had with the provincial government. And opposite to what happened in Ontario, that last year, more than 1,500 workers got infected with COVID. Unfortunately, more than, I think it's almost 10 migrant workers who have died as a result of COVID. And then in British Columbia, we did not have the same amount of problem in terms of COVID, but we could see that in Ontario, because British Columbia was the only government who decided to do the quarantine at the hotels. In the rest of Canada, this was left to the owners of the farm. That where we could see the system of racism also, where people were taken to the farms, where housing is not the proper housing for migrant workers, right? Where they were putting groups of 10, 15 people in 2 bedrooms, and then quickly got infected with COVID, right? I'm not saying that we did not have that situation here. We had that situation. At the beginning was managed okay with the quarantine at the hotels, but then the quarantine by itself was also a piece of manipulation later on, because when the workers were transferred to the farms, then that's where we saw the biggest piece of discrimination and also racism, where the quarantine was manipulated in terms of not allowing the workers to go and do their shopping. They had to go twice a month or once a month to do shopping. We had to organize bringing food to workers, sometimes at dark times when no one saw us. And this is incredible racism going on at the farms.
That was, that must have also been incredibly frightening for them. So thank you for that, Byron. Shanee, is there anything you would like to add?
Well, thank you, Byron, for explaining that to us, because definitely migrant workers have been impacted, acutely from this pandemic, and we don't have the supports in place to make sure that they can access resources in a more equitable manner. So thank you for that. And just in terms of, Barb, what you had asked about the South Asian community, I think, for all racialized communities, racism is hard, and this pandemic has been really hard. Just a little focus on the South Asian community. I think one of the things that we have seen is that South Asian folks are overrepresented in many different sectors like retail. We know that they are overrepresented in healthcare, and they're doing a lot of the frontline work in our community. And again, when you're doing frontline work and you're doing it in a pandemic, you definitely need supports to be protected from this from this virus that is flowing around. And in the beginning stages of the pandemic, there was little that was done by government to protect retail workers, for example, with barriers and different things like that, so that they could do the work that they needed to do, but also have protection in the workplace. I think another thing we've seen with the elections and the federal election is the NDP party did have a South Asian man running, and that's Jagmeet Singh, and he experienced a lot of racism throughout that campaign, with people hurling threats, making racist comments in chats and different things like that. And I think one of the factors we have to think about racism in Canada is that the nature of it is always othering brown and black bodies. And this is something that South Asian communities have to deal with all the time, as well as other Black and Indigenous racialized communities.
Absolutely. Thanks for raising that, Shanee. The other thing too, especially through this pandemic, is that we really lacked the data about the disproportionate impact on racialized workers. So thank you for raising that. And that's definitely a fight that we'll need to continue. Okay, so on to the next question. In your experience, and let's start with Byron. In your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions about racism in today's context?
I would say that the misconception of racism is that, especially in Canada, right? The fact that every time that we talk to groups sometimes of the society about this problem, they say, "Oh, but in Canada we are tolerant." Just the word tolerant means that there is racism. And the misconception that in Canada racism is not happening against migrant workers, it's totally a lie, right? It is like, oh, we are not America, and then that's the most common comment that I hear. We are not America. Come on, we are Americans. We are all Americans. The whole continent is American. We were born in this continent but at the same time, is that people want to separate themselves from being in the same situation as the United States. We are facing the same situation in the rural area as United States. And during the last few years, especially during COVID, we have seen the same problems happening in the farms in the United States, the same problems happening here.
Very true. Shanee, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Byron, for pointing that out, because I do hear that a lot as well. Like, oh, we're not the United States. We're not doing, these specific things. We're not like Trump. Mm-hmm. But, what you alluded to is so important, because the truth is, the treatment of migrant workers here, the treatment of racialized folks here, Black and Indigenous people, is mirrored globally. And that's because racism is systemic. And so you have to think about the systems. One of the common misconceptions about racism in Canada and a lot of other places is that it's individual, it's an incident. And we see this when we see racist incidents highlighted on the news or in media. And it's like, oh, somebody, unfortunately was physically assaulted. And that's what they're highlighting. But those stories need to be coupled with, well, what was done about that situation? What protections were offered to these people when they did use public transportation or when they were accessing a resource that they needed? And we don't talk about the full context, because the full context would show that the system is inadequate, and it's always been like that. And I think that is the biggest misconception. We don't understand fully, and we should seek to do this, how the system is intertwined in our individual experiences.
Yeah, so let's build on that, on what you just said then, Shanee. Like, what do you think of the other big challenges and opportunities? So challenges and opportunities when it comes to this topic?
Well, I think challenges, and, I am an educator, and, as a teacher in this province, like I do recognize that we need definitely more education. And the challenge with that is we can continually keep educating folks, but if we don't have the laws and policies to back us up, What are we educating for? And I think that is really, like, that's an important thing that I think about all the time when I'm doing this work. You know, let's just remember, racism is a deeply traumatic experience. Has a psychological effect. People every single day, Black and Indigenous people of color, are carrying around an enormous backpack, and they have nothing, nowhere to go to like sort that stuff out, and you carry it with you. And when I think about opportunities, education is an opportunity for us to build solidarity across the board so that we are asking those people that are in leadership positions, in decision-making positions, to make adequate changes so this stops happening, but at the same time building the solidarity that is so necessary, because an injury to one is an injury to all. And we have far too many people that are experiencing violence in the form of racism in the workplace, in public spaces, and pretty much anywhere you go. And I think we have to endeavor to change that.
That's for sure. It's absolutely everywhere. Byron, to you, what do you think are the biggest challenges and opportunities?
I think I haven't even touched the fact that when we talk about migrant workers, we are talking also about thousands of undocumented, even undocumented workers or agricultural migrant workers. They never had access to the support, to economical support during COVID. They could not access the federal support. They could not access the provincial supports. Nothing. It is like, and who were the workers who had to stay in the construction sites during the COVID time? Undocumented workers. They were exposed to COVID. They didn't have access to healthcare. Then and the challenges as well is that there is always this concept, this belief that how good we are, that how good is the provincial health officer that is vaccinating all the migrant workers that come to the quarantine, or how good is the provincial health officer that it's opening the possibility of documented workers to have testing for COVID. It is not a gift. We had to fight for it. COVID came as a challenge for us, and it came as an opportunity to fight for things. We had to fight to get vaccinations for undocumented workers. We had to fight to get them allowed to get into the possibility of testing. Now we need support, and I will let you know about the support later on. Yes.
Okay, so that's really great. So both of you have raised the importance about laws and policies, and and filling in those gaps. So think as we go forward about let's name some of those laws and policies. What do we demand of our government as we continue in our conversation? So in the meantime, though, let's talk about what are some of the current initiatives that you know about, and how well do you think they're working? Byron, do you want to start?
Sure. And some of I'm just going to talk about the most fresh initiative. It is that, as you know, a few organizations signed a letter to the provincial government recently asking the provincial government to facilitate the process to get the vaccination card for undocumented workers and agricultural workers. A big problem there because people don't have MSPs, then they got vaccinated, but they don't have a PHN number, then it's a mess. It's a mess and it's so hard for people to get their vaccination, the proof of vaccination. Then we are in the middle of, it's not a big campaign, it's just in the middle of sending letters to the government, and we probably need support from HEU in facilitating some communication there. And also, if you check the Sanctuary Health site, our blog or our site, you will find that we are also starting the campaign to end the 3 months waiting period for getting into healthcare. Currently, migrant workers have to wait 3 months in order to get MSP, then there is a 3 months period that it's really hard for them to have access to healthcare. It's not only for migrant workers, it's for many people who leave Canada, they had to come back. Then we are in the middle of this campaign, and I can send more information later on about this.
All right, I'll see. Actually, maybe we can get Kaylee or someone to track down the Sanctuary Health website, and we'll put that in the chat. There we go. Look at that, just like that. Thank you so much for doing that. Shanee, tell us about some anti-racist initiatives.
Yeah, so right now the government is actually engaging in data collection on racism, and this data collection is running from September, I believe, 9th to November 30th. So I would really encourage folks to go in and take the survey and offer their experience, offer what they know and what they see as changes that are required to make our workplaces safer, our public spaces safer, et cetera. And I don't know how well that's going to work. I just know that if government is asking for data collection on this, asking for our stories in order to implement, we hope, an anti-racist legislation, I think that could be in the benefit of all communities. So I did provide a link, and hopefully that'll get shared. As well, I am the PSA president. So a PSA is a Provincial Specialist Association of my union, which is the British Columbia Teachers Association. Our association is called the Anti-Oppression Educators Collective, and it's been an honor. I've had the opportunity to have Byron and Sanctuary Health as part of that work. And we have a website, which is www.aoec.ca. Right now, we are running a campaign where we have asked the Ministry of Education to implement 2 days in the K-12 education system for decolonial work. An important part of this is we have asked that our Indigenous colleagues are exempt from that. And if you feel inclined to support us in this campaign, please go ahead and sign our petition, which is on our website. We are going to keep advocating. Government has not implemented that yet, but we're going to keep pushing because it's so important that on these occupied and unceded territories that we start our anti-racist work from a position of truth and reconciliation. So that's one initiative, and we haven't got our end goal, but we're going to keep pushing.
Can I say something else about that?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Byron.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that also, if you get into the Migrant Rights Network site or Facebook, you will find our different campaigns, and our bigger anti-racist campaign is our campaign for immigration status for all. Our big fight is for every migrant worker to get a permanent residence. We are saying that we are tired of having a path to permanent residence. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Then our main anti-racism campaign is status for all, immigration status for all. If people are coming to work here, they should have the right to apply for permanent resident status as soon as they come, right? No delays on that. And also for people who are already working here, also people who are undocumented, who have been working here for many years and they haven't had the chance to apply for permanent residence. Now is the time to support our campaign for status for all.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, actually, to both of you for weaving in that question around policies and laws and what do we need to do. So these initiatives are really, really important. So, and I love that in the chat that I see that people are asking this question, and I love this. What else can people do to get involved? Where can we go for more learning and for more resources? Byron, have you got other resources on top of what you've already provided?
Not at this time. I would really suggest the Migrant Rights Network. It's easy to find it on Google, and we have a good description of the different campaigns that we do have. And at the provincial level in British Columbia, we have different migrant groups who are part of the network. Migrant ABC is one of them, domestic and caregiver workers. is the other one. We have Rama from Kelowna, who is part of that, and Rama in the island as well. Well, we are all part of this this network, and you are. I'm so happy if you can send us an email. There is a way that you can get in touch with the Migrant Rights Network, and we will be sending to you information about our campaigns, or when we stand up in front of
Byron,
office.
Byron, I think your internet is glitching a little bit. I mean, it's just kind of been an unfortunate evening for glitches. I apologize to everyone. So we missed that last little bit, Byron. I don't know if your internet is back or not, but that last sentence we didn't quite catch.
No, I was just referring to, we will be happy if you send us a message through the Migrant Rights Network, and then we can send to you regularly our information about our campaigns.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And and I know that many of our members, HEU members, certainly those that are on the equity committees, they're very involved in the Migrant Rights Network, and people like Tita and Cora and others. So just so proud of our members to be joining in on those campaigns and supporting this work as well. Okay, so Shanee, what do you think people can do to get involved?
Yeah, and I think that is in a really awesome aspect of anti-racist work. It's all action-oriented, so you can find out about grassroots organizations in whatever community you're in and participate with them. I also wanted to just offer you two resources. There is the government does have a website, and they have a resource called Erase, and that you'll see that they have a number of resources, things for cyberbullying, things for racism. So you'll see that. And I think that there's actually a really great poster campaign that you can put up in your workspace. As well, at the BC Fed, the BC Federation of Labor, which is the umbrella organization for unions here in British Columbia, we do have a Worker of Color caucus. There also is a caucus for LGBTQ, identifying folks, Indigenous folks, and workers with disabilities. And if you feel that that is a space, one of those caucuses is a space that you like to join, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can contact the BC Fed, and they'll put you on to an email list so that you can attend meetings. The Worker of Color caucus does meet monthly. And if you identify as a person of color, we'd love to have you there. As well, on aoec.ca, which is the organization I'm president of, we have a resources page and many resources that you can use in your work site. We have some topics and things for book clubs, and a list of resources that you could read in your committees. So yeah, that's the greatest part about anti-racist work, is that it's unlimited what we can do.
Absolutely. Unlimited resources everywhere. Thank you so much to the folks at HEU that are putting these links in the chat. So feel free to click on those. Those will open up in your browser, and you can, get a real good look at these resources. Are there any questions from our audience? Okay, there's a question from Shelley. What is one thing folks can do in everyday life to stand up to racism and to systemic racism? Who'd like to take this one on?
Wow.
Well, I'll take a shot at it, and then, Byron, I know you'll want to add something in. So what is one thing you can do? And I think it depends on where your social location is. I think for people of color, for Black and Indigenous communities, there's been way too much burden on us to be the ones advocating for racism. So for those of you that don't identify as a person of color, as Black and Indigenous, for our white allies, it would be really great if you could do the work of standing up to racism. And really leading the charge. And you can do that with there is so much anti-racist literature out there to help you do that work. And I think when we're talking about standing up to systemic racism, again, like, there are so many movements happening right now. Think about what Indigenous communities need. All this helpful information Byron has provided us on what migrant communities require, and look at that through an intersectional lens. Like, whatever you are doing in one place, it can link to other places. And how can we integrate other calls for action into our work? And I think we'll really make a lot of change. But you have to think about your social location and what you can do to help others.
Thanks, Shanee. Byron, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I think the only thing that I would like to add is continuously have reflection. I don't know, every morning I had to reflect when I'm going to work, what I'm going to do to make a change at work. What can I change? But following my values, following my way of being, every small step counts. If you are part of an institution, if you can present ideas of policies inside the institution, or having a policy on sanctuary city principles. HEU endorsed sanctuary city principles a few years ago. Then anything that welcomes people into your sites.
Sorry, Byron, we lost you again just at that end about HEU had signed on to Sanctuary Health, which is fantastic. But then we didn't hear the last little piece. I'm sure it was absolutely profound. So take the space now if you want to say it again.
No, thank you. Sorry about these internet issues. I tried to pay the best internet here and it's not working. And definitely, I would say that promoting sanctuary spaces in every institution that you work, in every space that you work, that's a big anti-racism attitude, because it's a welcoming for people and working side by side with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad we got to hear you say that. It worked that time. All right. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions from the audience. Okay, so then I'm going to go to my favorite question. This is the best one. I always save it for last. Tell me, Byron, let's start with you. What gives you hope?
I would say that from my side, what gives me hope all the time, it's again reflecting and remembering that we are not alone on this struggle, that there's other people in the same struggle for changing, for social justice. Also, what gives me hope is that there are so many people that in our lives that play an important role for us to be who we are today. And then changes are possible. And my way, I follow always the ideas of my friends, my compañeros, my comrades who were kidnapped in Guatemala, who were killed in Guatemala, but they gave me the courage to continue this fight for hope. What gave me hope a long time ago as a teenager was that one day I said, I will fight all my life to make social justice part of my heart.
Thank you, brother. Shanee,
Thank you.
Tell me, what gives you hope?
Well, what Byron just said, thank you so much for that. And I know that you've seen a lot in your experience, and thank you for lending us your comrades, because that really gives me a sense of hope and also a sense of direction. So gratitude. One of my favorite writers is Mariame Kaba, and she's an abolitionist. And her work is so profound. And she writes, you know, hope is a discipline. And that gives me hope, because I think as a young person, when I was beginning on my, you know, my activism road, I thought that hope was this beautiful pie in the sky dream out there, some kind of utopia. But actually, hope is the path that we walk together to make the change. And it is full of challenges and barriers. It's going to be full of disappointment, but hope is the discipline we take to just not stop. And one of the things, going back to our first question, was, you know, tell us about the rise of racism. I think that thinking about that question and thinking about how hope is a discipline, I really want people of color, Black and Indigenous people, to understand that we don't have to be silent. And it is scary. There is, for a lot of people, talking about racism, talking about injustice means that in your workplace, in whatever space, there's going to be a backlash. And I'm not blaming anybody if they don't choose to get up on their soapbox and yell and say that this is happening. But I want us to collectively understand that we can call and name out bad behavior. We can tell people that something is not right, and that when they gaslight us and tell us, well, are you sure that's what happened? Yeah, it did. And we get to stand up for ourselves, and we need to do it more and more. And when you look at this younger generation that I get the privilege of teaching, they're doing it. And they're doing it because people like Byron, other activists have been doing it for so long. So that to me is the hope. And so let's just keep going on this road, because they can't stop us.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring. Both of your hopeful comments were incredibly inspiring. Any final thoughts? Any final calls to action? Anything else that you're asking and demanding of us, you know, to do in our personal lives or otherwise? What else can we do?
I think as it was mentioned previously, that there are different grassroots groups, and I feel that at the union level it's important to also recognize the importance to support the work of the different grassroots groups, recognizing that sometimes at the union level we do have a problem in terms of we do have our own challenges, right? The existence of our own caucus, the caucus, is the fact that we have our own challenges institutionally. The fact that one day I was bringing this issue to one of the unions, the issue of migrant workers, undocumented migrant workers, and I was told that that union, oh, sorry, we believe in Canadian jobs for Canadian people. Then I felt like a bit cold water on me. But that made me think that there's a lot to do in our own unions. And then what you are doing, thank you for inviting us. Invite other people to make changes in our own unions. And that's basically what will cause change. We have to change first.
Absolutely. So well said. And I know that the BCTF has done tremendous amount of work on this front. Shanee, do you want to share some of what the BCTF has done?
Yeah, so our organization has endorsed also like sanctuary spaces, like teamed up with the BC Fed to do that, but also within our own organization. As well, we've had BCTF teachers work on a sanctuary school movement. Byron would also know a lot about that, and sanctuary health was instrumental in getting some policy shifts in the New West School District. That is still an ongoing struggle, because if your parents don't have status, you as a child most likely won't have it either. And then you might be inhibited from accessing schooling. And we really want every child to be able to access school, because it's a fundamental human right, much like it's a fundamental human right to access healthcare. So I think that is an important thing, and the BCTF has been behind that. Other initiatives that the BCTF is supporting and has supported, is also making sure that our schools and our communities are upholding and supporting the rights of the LGBTQ plus communities. We know that there has been some discussion of transphobia from elected officials that has really negatively impacted youth and students, and the BCTF has been vocal against that. And we ask that other organizations and everybody continue to support communities of LGBTQ plus communities, because it is really hard to be who you are in this world. And I know that as a racialized woman, and it's not fair to folks. So we got to keep fighting on that front. The BCTF also has like all our social justice resources on an open page, and any union member can come and check them out and use our resources. The HEU was a leader in an equity audit, and the BCTF took those ideas and also implemented audits in our own organization. And just speaking about that as a racialized member of a union, I know that it's really challenging to challenge racism in our own space, but we can. And I know that sometimes people will not listen. There's going to be a backlash, whatever that is. I just want you to know, like, you're not alone, and you're not going to be alone. And just get out there and get to a mic and say something. You know, Barb is going to be there to support you. And that's how the changes happen, when we actually just get out there and we say what's on our mind, because for far too long, BIPOC communities have been asked to be silent.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank Byron for raising the work that we need to do in our own spaces. And I just wanted to highlight the amazing work that BCTF is doing. And Shanee, I know that you're a driving force in your union on this front. So thank you to both of you for raising this really important issue that we have a lot of work to do. Even though, you know, we've come so far, we still got a long way to go. I also want to say, you know, I loved the quote that Rabia put in the chat. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. You know, that was Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Absolutely beautiful quote, very timely. Thanks for adding that in. So, you know, once again, we are so grateful to have such incredible guests joining us in our equity webinars. You know, I've learned so much, and again, more resources that I know that I'm going to be looking at the second we close up tonight, and I'll be diving deep into a lot of these. So I just want to say, you know, thank you to both of you for being here with us tonight. This has been a really engaging and interesting conversation. And again, I want to thank the Ethnic Diversity Committee at HEU and all of the activists that, you know, that are working so hard to fight against racism. This is such incredibly important work. So, of course, we want to thank our members and the participants for joining us this evening. We'd really love to hear about how you felt this session went, including the technical difficulties. Feel free, but you know, we'll put the feedback form in the chat. It's really helpful for us to improve and re-offer something like this again in the future, but even in a better format. So that's pasted into the chat, and we will also be emailing that out to all of the registered participants. So our next session, we're not done yet. We still got more to come. Our next session is going to be on the topic of the unique impact of COVID-19 on women. So join us, same time, same place, Wednesday, September 29th, for a discussion with my good friend, Janessa Greening. So for everybody, have a great evening, and I hope to see you next week, same time, same place, on the next webinar. Thanks, everybody, and have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.